The dust swirled across the main street of Westcliff, Colorado, as Cassandra Davis hurried toward her father's general store, her medical bag clutched tightly in her hand. The year was 1885, and she had just returned from Denver, where she'd studied nursing under one of the few female doctors willing to take on a student. At 23, she was determined to bring modern medicine to this remote corner of the frontier, even if the townsfolk still viewed her skills with suspicion. "Cassie," her father's voice called from the doorway of Davis General Mercantile. "Come quickly. There's been an accident at the Xander Ranch." Cassandra's heart quickened. The Xander Ranch was the largest cattle operation in the county, run by the stern but fair-minded rancher Henry Xander and his son Wade. Though she'd grown up in the same town as Wade Xander, their paths had rarely crossed. He'd been sent east for schooling when they were children, and since his return 3 years ago he'd kept mostly to himself, working the ranch and avoiding town gatherings. "What happened?" she asked, rushing to meet her father on the wooden boardwalk. "Stampede. Wade's been hurt bad. Mr. Xander sent one of his hands to fetch you specifically." Her father's expression was grave. "Said he heard you were back with medical training." Cassandra nodded. "I need to gather my supplies." Within minutes, she had packed her leather satchel with everything she might need: bandages, sutures, tincture of iodine, laudanum, and the surgical tools she'd purchased in Denver. She hurried outside where a ranch hand waited with 2 horses. "Miss Davis?" the young cowboy asked, his hat clutched in his hands. "I'm Charlie from Xander Ranch. Mr. Wade's in a bad way, miss." "Tell me what happened," Cassandra said as she mounted the horse, arranging her skirts as best she could for the ride. "Cattle got spooked by a lightning strike. Mr. Wade was trying to turn the herd when his horse went down. Got trampled something fierce." Charlie's voice cracked with worry. "We pulled him out, but he's bleeding bad. Mr. Xander said to fetch you since Doc Miller is away in Pueblo." They rode hard for 5 miles, dust billowing behind them. The Xander Ranch house came into view, a substantial 2-story structure built of pine logs with a wide porch and several outbuildings nearby. 3 cowboys stood anxiously by the corral, their faces grim. Cassandra dismounted before her horse had fully stopped, rushing toward the house with her bag. Henry Xander met her at the door, his weathered face etched with worry. He was a tall man in his 50s with silver streaking his dark hair. "Miss Davis," he said with a nod. "Thank you for coming." "Wade's in the back bedroom." She followed him through the house, noting the fine furnishings that spoke of Eastern tastes mixed with frontier practicality. When they reached the bedroom, Cassandra steeled herself for what she might find. Wade Xander lay on a large bed, his shirt cut away to reveal a torso mottled with bruises and lacerations. Blood had soaked through makeshift bandages on his right thigh and left side. His face, though pale, was striking strong jaw covered with several days' worth of stubble, straight nose and dark brows. His eyes were closed, his breathing labored. "Everyone out," she commanded, setting her bag on a nearby table. "I need clean water, as much as you can bring, and all the lamps you have." Henry Xander nodded, backing from the room. "Whatever you need, miss. Just save my boy." Cassandra approached the bed, her professional demeanor masking her concern. Wade's injuries were serious, possibly life-threatening. She carefully removed the blood-soaked cloths to reveal a deep gash on his thigh that would require immediate suturing. His ribs were likely broken, and a wound on his left side suggested he might have been gored by a horn. "Mr. Xander," she called, pressing her fingers to Wade's wrist to check his pulse. "Can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes the color of a summer storm gray with hints of blue. Recognition flickered briefly. "Miss Davis." His voice was a rasp. Didn't expect to see you again like this. Try not to speak, she instructed, opening her bag to prepare her instruments. I need to clean and stitch these wounds. A ranch hand brought in steaming water and additional lamps as requested. Cassandra worked methodically, first cleaning the wounds with carbolic solution, then preparing to suture the deepest cuts. Wade's leg would require the most attention. The gash was deep, exposing muscle beneath. This will hurt, she warned him, threading a curved needle. I can give you laudanum for the pain. Wade shook his head weakly. No need. To stay alert. Stubborn, she muttered, but admired his resolve. At least take a drink of whiskey. Henry Xander appeared with a bottle of good Kentucky bourbon. Wade took several swallows, grimacing as the liquor burned his throat. Cassandra began her work, her hands steady despite the gravity of the situation. The first stitch drew a sharp intake of breath from Wade, but he didn't cry out. She worked efficiently, closing the wound on his thigh with neat, even stitches. You've gotten good at this, Wade managed through gritted teeth. Remember when you used to patch up barn cats? Cassandra looked up in surprise. You remember that? The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Hard to forget, the only girl in town who could outride most boys and still stitch up a wounded animal. She felt a blush creeping up her neck but focused on her work. That was a long time ago, Mr. Xander. Wade, he corrected, wincing as she began cleaning the wound on his side. After this, think you can. Call me Wade. The wound on his side was concerning but not as deep as she'd feared. His ribs, however, were badly bruised and at least two appeared broken. She bound them tightly after applying a poultice to reduce swelling. For nearly 2 hours, Cassandra worked tirelessly, cleaning and dressing each wound, checking for signs of internal bleeding, and monitoring Wade's pulse and breathing. Henry Xander hovered nearby, bringing fresh water and towels as needed. He'll need careful watching, Cassandra said as she finally packed away her instruments. The next day or two will be critical. He's lost a lot of blood and there's risk of fever. Will he live? Henry asked bluntly. Cassandra met the older man's gaze. If infection doesn't set in, yes. But he needs constant care. Then you must stay, Henry declared. We'll pay whatever you ask. The ranch hands no cattle, not nursing. She hesitated. Staying at the ranch alone with Wade and his father might raise eyebrows in town. But her medical training and conscience wouldn't allow her to leave a patient in such condition. I'll need to send word to my father, she said finally, and fetch more supplies from town. Henry nodded, relief evident on his face. Charlie can ride in with your message and bring back whatever you need. That night, Cassandra slept fitfully in a chair beside Wade's bed. She woke every hour to check his condition, applying cool cloths to his forehead when fever threatened and changing his bandages when blood seeped through. By morning, she was exhausted but relieved to find his pulse stronger and his breathing more regular. Henry brought her breakfast on a tray: eggs, bacon, and biscuits still warm from the oven. Cook says you're to eat all of it, he said gruffly. No sense in having 2 sick people on my hands. Cassandra smiled gratefully. Thank you, Mr. Xander. Your son seems to be holding his own. Henry studied Wade's sleeping form. He's a fighter, always has been. Even as a boy, he'd never give up, no matter how hard things got. He hesitated, then added, his mother was the same way before she passed. I'm sorry for your loss, Cassandra said softly. She had vague memories of Elizabeth Xander, a beautiful woman with kind eyes who had succumbed to consumption when Cassandra was just a child. It was a long time ago, Henry replied. But Wade took it hard. That's why I sent him east to my brother in Boston. Thought it might be easier for him to grow up away from the memories. Cassandra nodded, understanding better now why Wade had disappeared from her childhood. He seems to have found his place here now. He has, Henry agreed. This land is in his blood, same as it's in mine. He glanced out the window at the vast Colorado landscape. He's meant to take over someday. Can't do that if he's in the ground. He won't be, Cassandra assured him. Not if I have anything to say about it. Henry's weathered face creased in a smile. I believe you, Miss Davis. The day passed slowly. Charlie returned from town with Cassandra's supplies and a note from her father expressing concern, but giving his blessing for her to stay as long as needed. Wade drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid enough to take sips of broth or water, other times delirious with fever. During one of his fevered episodes, he grasped Cassandra's hand tightly. "Don't leave," he murmured, his eyes unfocused. "Stay with me, Cassie." The use of her childhood nickname startled her. "I'm here, Wade," she replied softly, squeezing his hand. "I'm not going anywhere." His lips curved in a brief smile before he slipped back into sleep. For 3 days, Cassandra barely left Wade's side. She changed his bandages, cleaned his wounds, and monitored his condition with unwavering attention. Henry provided a room for her to rest, but she spent most of her time in the chair beside Wade's bed. On the 4th morning, she woke to find Wade watching her, his gray-blue eyes clear and alert. "You look terrible," he said, his voice stronger than it had been since the accident. Cassandra straightened in her chair, smoothing her rumpled skirt. "Thank you for that assessment, Mr. Xander." A smile touched his lips. "I thought we agreed on Wade." "That was when I thought you might die," she replied dryly. "Now that you're feeling well enough to insult me, we can return to formalities." He laughed, then winced, pressing a hand to his bandaged ribs. "I deserved that. What I meant to say was that you look tired." "Have you been here the whole time?" Cassandra nodded, standing to check his bandages. "Someone needed to keep an eye on you. Your fever broke last night, which is a good sign." Wade caught her wrist as she reached to feel his forehead. His touch was warm and surprisingly gentle for a man who worked with cattle and horses. "Thank you," he said simply. "My father told me what you've done." Cassandra felt her cheeks warming under his intense gaze. "I'm a nurse now. It's what I'm trained to do." Most trained nurses wouldn't have ridden out to a ranch at a moment's notice or stayed day and night with a patient, he pointed out. She gently extracted her wrist from his grasp. "Perhaps not, but most trained nurses aren't as stubborn as I am." That earned another smile from him. "I remember that about you." Over the next few days, Wade's condition improved steadily. He began sitting up in bed, then taking short walks around his room with Cassandra's assistance. His strength returned gradually, though the deep gash in his thigh required careful monitoring. Cassandra changed his bandages daily, cleaning the wound and checking for signs of infection. During these sessions, they talked cautiously at first, then with growing ease. Wade asked about her training in Denver, and Cassandra shared stories of the remarkable female doctor who had taught her. In turn, Wade spoke of his years in Boston, studying at Harvard before the pull of the ranch brought him home. "I never intended to stay in the East," he confessed as she checked his stitches one afternoon. "Every spring when the letters came from Father describing calving season, I'd stare out at Boston Harbor and imagine myself back here." "Yet you stayed for years," Cassandra observed, applying fresh bandages. Wade nodded, watching her hands work with practiced efficiency. "My uncle insisted I finish my education, said a modern rancher needs to understand business and law as much as cattle and horses." A wry smile crossed his face. "He wasn't wrong, but I miss this land every day." "It gets under your skin," Cassandra agreed, thinking of her own brief time away. "The vastness of it, the way the light changes on the mountains." "Exactly," Wade's eyes lit up. "In Boston, everything feels contained. Here a person can breathe. As Wade recovered, Cassandra found herself increasingly drawn to him. He was not the arrogant rancher's son she'd half expected, but a thoughtful man with unexpected depths. He read voraciously. His room contained shelves of books ranging from classical literature to modern scientific texts. He spoke intelligently about politics and showed genuine interest in her medical knowledge. A week after the accident, Henry Xander insisted Cassandra join them for dinner in the dining room rather than taking her meal on a tray. Wade was well enough to sit at the table, though he moved stiffly and needed a cane to walk. The dining room impressed Cassandra with its simple elegance: a large oak table, comfortable chairs, and china that must have come from back east. Cook had prepared a roast with potatoes and fresh bread, far better fare than Cassandra had been eating in town. "This is wonderful," she said appreciatively after her first bite. "I haven't had a meal this good since Denver." Henry nodded. "Cook takes pride in her work. She came with us from Texas 15 years ago and has turned down offers from hotels in Denver to stay here." "I can see why you'd want to keep her," Cassandra replied. The conversation flowed easily through dinner. Henry asked about her father's store and shared news of neighboring ranches. Wade spoke little but watched Cassandra intently, a half-smile playing at his lips whenever she grew animated discussing her plans to improve health care in the area. "The problem is," she explained, "most people won't seek medical attention until they're desperately ill. If we could teach prevention and basic care, we might save many lives." "You should talk to the schoolteacher," Henry suggested. "Perhaps arrange to speak to the children. They'll carry the message home." "That's an excellent idea," Cassandra said with enthusiasm. "Children are often the best way to reach parents." Wade leaned forward, wincing slightly at the movement. "You could use the ranch as well. When the hands come in for supplies or payment, you could offer basic care. Many haven't seen a doctor in years." Cassandra considered this. "Would you be willing to host something like that?" "Of course," Wade replied without hesitation. "We employ 30 men during calving and branding. Most have families in the area. It would benefit everyone." After dinner, Henry excused himself to review accounts with his foreman, leaving Wade and Cassandra alone. Wade suggested they take coffee on the porch as the evening was mild. "Are you sure you should be walking that much?" Cassandra asked, concern evident in her voice. Wade smiled. "I have my nurse with me, don't I? Besides, I'm going stir-crazy in that bedroom." The porch wrapped around 3 sides of the house, offering views of the mountains to the west and the vast expanse of rangeland to the south. Wade lowered himself carefully into a rocking chair, gesturing for Cassandra to take the one beside him. A ranch hand brought coffee and quietly withdrew. They sat in companionable silence for several minutes, watching as the setting sun painted the mountains in hues of pink and gold. The air was cool and scented with pine. "I never thanked you properly," Wade said finally, turning to face her. "You saved my life, Cassandra." "You were lucky," she replied. "If the horn had struck a few inches higher or if you'd lost more blood before I arrived." "But it didn't, and I didn't," he interrupted gently, "because of you." Cassandra felt her cheeks warm under his steady gaze. "It's what anyone with training would have done." "No," Wade shook his head. "It's not. Most women would have fainted at the sight of such injuries. Most men, too, for that matter, but you walked in and took command like a general." She laughed softly. "I'm not sure your father appreciated being ordered about in his own home." "He was impressed," Wade assured her. "He told me so. Said you reminded him of my mother. She had the same steel in her spine." "That's quite a compliment from what I've heard of her." Wade's expression softened. "She would have liked you. She valued education and independence in women. She taught me to respect those qualities." "She sounds remarkable," Cassandra murmured. She was. Wade stared out at the darkening landscape. "I still miss her, even after all these years." On impulse, Cassandra reached over and placed her hand on his. "Of course you do. She was your mother." Wade turned his hand to clasp hers, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "Thank you for understanding." They remained that way for several long moments, hands joined, watching as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the sky. Something shifted between them in that quiet moment, a recognition of mutual respect and growing affection that neither was quite ready to name. The following morning, Cassandra examined Wade's wounds and declared them healing well. "The stitches in your thigh can come out in another week," she told him. "Your ribs will take longer to heal completely, but as long as you don't do anything foolish, you should recover fully." "Define foolish," Wade said with a grin. "Riding, roping, lifting anything heavier than a book," Cassandra listed, repacking her medical bag. "Essentially being a cowboy." Wade sighed dramatically. "Then I'm sentenced to boredom for how long?" "At least 3 more weeks for the ribs," she replied. "Though light activity can begin sooner. Walking is good, gentle stretching is tolerated." "And will my nurse stay to oversee this recovery?" he asked, his tone light but his eyes serious. Cassandra hesitated. She had already stayed longer than she'd initially planned, and there was talk in town. Charlie had reported that some gossip had started about her extended stay at the ranch. "I should return to town," she said reluctantly. "My father needs help at the store, and there are other people who need medical attention." Disappointment flickered across Wade's face, but he nodded. "Of course, you have responsibilities, but perhaps you could ride out every few days to check on your patient." "That seems reasonable," she agreed, relieved at the compromise. "And you must promise to send for me immediately if there's any change in your condition, increased pain, fever, or if the wounds look inflamed." "I promise," Wade said solemnly, then added with a mischievous glint, "though I might be tempted to exaggerate symptoms just to see my nurse more often." Cassandra tried to look stern but couldn't quite manage it. "That would be very dishonest, Mr. Xander." "Wade," he corrected her again. "After all we've been through, surely we're past formalities." "Wade," she conceded with a small smile. Henry insisted on having Charlie escort her back to town, and on sending a crate of fresh vegetables and a side of beef as thanks to her father. Before she left, Wade came out to the porch, leaning heavily on his cane. "Ride safely," he said, his gray-blue eyes holding hers. "And remember your promise to return." "In 3 days," Cassandra confirmed, mounting her horse. "Try to stay out of trouble until then," he grinned. "No guarantees, but I'll do my best." The ride back to Westcliff was pleasant, the late summer day warm but not oppressive. Charlie chatted about ranch business and local news, careful to keep his horse at a pace Cassandra could manage comfortably. When they reached town, her father was waiting outside the store. "Cassie," he called, rushing forward to help her dismount. "I've been worried sick, even with your notes." "You look tired." "I'm fine, Pa," she assured him, embracing him warmly. "Just need a good night's sleep in my own bed." News of her return spread quickly through the small town. By afternoon, several people had stopped by the store, ostensibly to make purchases but really to satisfy their curiosity about Wade Xander's condition and her time at the ranch. Mrs. Peterson, the banker's wife and town gossip, was particularly direct. "My dear, you must have been simply terrified, alone with those Xander men," she said, examining bolts of fabric. "Henry has quite the reputation for being difficult, and that son of his keeps to himself in a most suspicious manner." "I found them both to be perfect gentlemen," Cassandra replied evenly. Mr. Xander was grateful for the care I provided his son, and Mr. Wade was an excellent patient. Wade, is it? Mrs. Peterson arched an eyebrow. How familiar you've become. Cassandra felt her temper rising but kept her voice calm. When you stitch a man's wounds and monitor his fever through the night, a certain level of familiarity is inevitable, Mrs. Peterson. It's called professional care. The older woman had the grace to look abashed. Of course, my dear. I didn't mean to imply anything untoward. It's just that a young, unmarried woman staying at a ranch with men. I understand your concern, Cassandra cut in, but I was there as a nurse, nothing more. Now, will you be purchasing that calico, or shall I show you the new shipment of gingham that arrived while I was away? Despite her professional demeanor, Cassandra found her thoughts drifting to Wade throughout the day. His smile, his intelligent conversation, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed, all had made an impression deeper than she cared to admit. She told herself it was natural to feel a connection to someone whose life she had helped save. Nothing more. 3 days later, true to her word, Cassandra rode out to the Xander ranch to check on her patient. She found Wade on the porch, a book open in his lap and a pencil in hand, making notes in the margin. Is this what passes for resting? She called as she approached, noting how the sunlight caught in his dark hair. Wade looked up, his face brightening. Cassandra, I was beginning to think you'd forgotten your promise. It's barely past noon, she replied, dismounting. A reasonable hour for a social call. Is that what this is? A social call. He set aside his book and rose to his feet, moving more easily than when she'd left. A medical visit with social elements, she clarified, retrieving her bag from her saddle. You're moving better. Your ministrations worked miracles, he said, gesturing to the chair beside his. Father will be disappointed to have missed you. He rode to Colorado Springs on business. Cassandra felt a flutter of something like nervousness at the realization they were alone, save for the ranch hands and house staff. Perhaps I should come back when he's returned. Nonsense, Wade said firmly. Cook is here and Martha is cleaning upstairs. Your reputation is safe, I assure you. Besides, I need my stitches checked, remember, she relented, following him inside to the sitting room where the light was better. Wade sat on a sofa and carefully rolled up his pant leg to reveal the bandaged thigh. Cassandra knelt beside him, unwrapping the bandage to examine the healing wound. This looks excellent, she said professionally, though her fingers trembled slightly as they brushed his skin. The inflammation is gone and it's knitting together nicely. A few more days for these stitches, I think. Wade watched her face as she worked. And the verdict on my overall condition, Nurse Davis, she glanced up to find his face closer than expected. Improving, but still in need of care. How are the ribs? Sore, but better. I can breathe without feeling like I'm being stabbed. Progress, she nodded, rebandaging his leg. And you've been following my instructions. No riding or heavy lifting. To the letter, he assured her, then grinned sheepishly. Though I confess it's driving me mad, I'm not accustomed to idleness. Read your books, she suggested, packing away her supplies. Write letters, plan for the future. I've been doing just that, he said, his expression turning serious. Planning, I mean. This accident has made me reconsider certain aspects of my life. Such as, Wade hesitated, then gestured around the room. This house was built for a family, not a bachelor and his aging father. I've realized I don't want to face another injury or worse without someone by my side. Someone who cares. Cassandra's heart quickened, but she kept her tone neutral. That's a common reaction after a brush with mortality. Perhaps, he conceded, but that doesn't make it any less true. His eyes held hers. I've been alone too long, Cassandra. Even before Mother died, I was a solitary child. Then Boston, Harvard, always the outsider. Since coming home, I've buried myself in work, avoiding connections. And now I find myself thinking about the future differently, about what and who might be part of it. The implication hung in the air between them. Cassandra stood, suddenly needing distance. I should go. My father is expecting me back to help with inventory. Wade rose as well, moving carefully. Of course, but will you come again, not just as my nurse? She hesitated, torn between propriety and the undeniable pull she felt toward him. Perhaps, for dinner next time, when your father is home. Relief and pleasure lit his features. I'd like that. Would Saturday be agreeable? Father returns Friday evening. Saturday would be fine, she agreed, gathering her things. Midday. I'll send Charlie to escort you, Wade offered, walking her to the door. At the threshold, he caught her hand. Thank you, Cassandra, not just for the medical care, but for listening, for understanding. She nodded, unable to form words with his hand warming hers and his eyes so intent on her face. He released her reluctantly, and she hurried to her horse, aware of his gaze following her until she disappeared down the road. The next few days dragged for Cassandra. She helped her father in the store, visited several families in need of medical attention, and tried not to think constantly about her upcoming dinner at the Xander ranch. She failed miserably at the latter, finding herself daydreaming about Wade's smile or the way his voice deepened when he spoke of things that mattered to him. You seem distracted, her father commented as they closed the store Friday evening. Is something troubling you, Cassie? She considered deflecting the question but decided on honesty. Not troubling exactly, I'm confused about certain feelings. Joseph Davis was a perceptive man. Would these feelings concern a certain rancher's son? Cassandra felt her cheeks grow warm. Is it that obvious? Only to a father who knows his daughter, he replied kindly. Wade Xander is a good man from what I know of him. His father runs an honest business, pays his debts, treats his workers fairly. It's not just that, Cassandra said hesitantly. He's different from what I expected. Educated, thoughtful. He respects my work, my mind, Joseph nodded. Important qualities in a potential husband. Father, she protested. I never said anything about marriage, he chuckled. No, but your eyes did. His expression grew more serious. Cassie, your mother and I always wanted you to find someone who would value you as you deserve. If Wade Xander is that man, you have my blessing to explore those feelings. His understanding meant more than Cassandra could express. She hugged him tightly, grateful for his support. Saturday dawned clear and cool, a perfect late summer day in the Colorado mountains. Cassandra dressed with particular care in her best day dress, a cornflower blue that brought out her eyes. She arranged her chestnut hair in a simple but elegant style, and even added a touch of rose water behind her ears. Charlie arrived precisely at 11 to escort her to the ranch. As they rode, he chatted amiably about ranch happenings and mentioned that Mr. Wade had been fussing like a bride all morning, ensuring everything was perfect for her visit. The thought of Wade being nervous about her coming made Cassandra smile. It seemed she wasn't alone in her anticipation. When they arrived, both Xander men were waiting on the porch. Henry stepped forward to help her dismount, his weathered face creased in a welcoming smile. Miss Davis, it's good to see you. Wade tells me you've been a miracle worker with his recovery. Hardly a miracle, she demurred. Just proper medical care and a cooperative patient. Cooperative? Wade approached, moving with only a slight limp now. I believe exemplary was the word you used. I don't recall saying that, she replied, smiling, though you did surprise me by following instructions. Henry laughed. High praise indeed from a medical professional. Come inside, Miss Davis. Cook has prepared a feast in your honor. The dining room had been transformed with a white tablecloth, polished silver, and fresh wildflowers in a crystal vase. The meal was elaborate by ranch standards: roast beef, mashed potatoes, fresh vegetables from the garden, and apple pie for dessert. The conversation flowed easily, with Henry sharing stories from his business trip and Wade describing the books he'd been reading during his convalescence. After the meal, Henry suggested a tour of the ranch grounds. "Wade's been cooped up too long. A gentle walk would do him good, don't you think, Miss Davis?" "As his nurse, I would prescribe exactly that," she agreed, suspecting Henry was deliberately creating an opportunity for them to be alone. Wade offered his arm, and they set off at a leisurely pace toward a small stream that ran along the eastern edge of the property. Cottonwoods lined the banks, providing welcome shade. "You're walking much better," Cassandra observed as they followed a well-worn path. "Having the right motivation helps," Wade replied, glancing down at her with a warm smile. "I wanted to show you this place." The path opened onto a small clearing beside the stream where a bench had been placed under the largest cottonwood. The view was magnificent, rolling hills leading to the distant mountains, with the ranch buildings nestled in the valley below. "It's beautiful," Cassandra breathed, taking in the scene. "My mother loved this spot," Wade said softly. "She used to come here to read or simply sit and watch the birds. Father built the bench for her after I was born." They sat side by side, listening to the gentle gurgle of the stream and the rustling of leaves overhead. A comfortable silence settled between them. "I've been thinking about what you said," Cassandra ventured finally. "About planning for the future differently." Wade turned slightly to face her, his expression serious. "And, I think, I might be considering my future differently as well," she admitted. "Before I went to Denver, I was so focused on my training, on proving I could be more than just a shopkeeper's daughter. Now that I'm back, I realize there's room for more in my life than just work." Hope flickered in Wade's eyes. "What kind of more are you considering?" Cassandra took a deep breath. "Connections, relationships, the kind of partnership my parents had based on mutual respect and shared purpose." "That sounds remarkably similar to what I've been thinking," Wade said, his voice low and earnest. "Cassandra, these past weeks have shown me what I've been missing, not just during my recovery but for years." He took her hand in his touch gentle but sure. "I know this may seem sudden. We've only recently become reacquainted, but I feel as though I've known you all my life in some ways. Your compassion, your intelligence, your determination, these are qualities I've come to admire deeply." "Wade," she began, but he shook his head. "Please let me finish. I'm not asking for promises yet. I'm asking for a chance for us to spend time together, to see if what I feel growing between us is something you feel too." Cassandra looked into his earnest face and felt the last of her reservations melting away. "I do feel it," she confessed. "It frightens me a little how quickly these feelings have developed. But yes, I would like to explore whatever this is between us." Relief and joy transformed Wade's features. On impulse, he leaned forward and pressed a soft, brief kiss to her lips so quick she barely had time to register the warmth of his mouth before he pulled away. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "That was presumptuous of me." "It was," she agreed, trying to look stern despite the smile tugging at her lips. "But not unwelcome." The weeks that followed took on a rhythm that felt both new and somehow familiar. Wade continued to heal, gradually resuming light duties around the ranch. Cassandra divided her time between helping at her father's store, providing medical care to the townspeople, and visiting the Xander ranch 2 or 3 times a week. Their courtship progressed with a blend of traditional propriety and practical frontier sensibilities. Wade would ride into town when he was able, taking Cassandra for meals at the hotel restaurant or accompanying her on visits to patients in the outlying areas. On Sundays after church, he often joined her family for dinner, engaging Joseph Davis in discussions of business and local politics. When Cassandra visited the ranch, they would walk along the stream, Wade's limp less pronounced each time. He taught her to fish in the clear mountain waters, laughing at her initial squeamishness about baiting the hook, but applauding her determination. She shared her knowledge of medicinal plants, showing him which wild herbs could be used for healing. One crisp October afternoon, they rode to a high meadow overlooking the valley. The aspen trees had turned golden, creating a breathtaking contrast against the deep green of the pines. Wade spread a blanket on the ground, and they shared a simple picnic of bread, cheese, and apples. "I have something for you," he said when they had finished eating. From his pocket, he withdrew a small wooden box, intricately carved with a pattern of leaves and flowers. "It's beautiful," Cassandra murmured, running her fingers over the detailed work. "Open it," Wade encouraged. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft cloth, lay a delicate silver locket. Cassandra gasped softly as Wade lifted it from the box and held it up. The sunlight caught the engraved surface, revealing an intricate design of intertwined roses. "It was my mother's," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. "Father gave it to her on their first anniversary. She wore it every day until she fell ill." "Wade, I couldn't possibly. She would have wanted you to have it," he insisted gently. "She always said it should go to the woman who captured my heart as completely as she captured my father's." Cassandra's eyes filled with tears. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I love you, Cassandra Davis," Wade said simply. "I think I've loved you since you walked into my bedroom with that medical bag and ordered everyone about. Maybe even before that, from memories of a brave, kind girl who cared for wounded animals and wasn't afraid to speak her mind." He took her hand, his gray-blue eyes intense with emotion. "I know we haven't known each other long, at least not as adults, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I want to build a future with you if you'll have me." "Are you proposing, Wade Xander?" Cassandra asked, her heart pounding. "I am," he confirmed, a smile lighting his features. "Rather awkwardly, I'm afraid. I should be on one knee." "Your leg is healed enough for this," he insisted, moving to kneel before her on the blanket. He took both her hands in his. "Cassandra Davis, will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Will you build a life with me, here on this land that we both love?" Cassandra looked into the face of the man who had gone from patient to friend to beloved in the span of a few short months. She thought of his quiet strength, his intelligence, his respect for her work and ambitions. She thought of how right it felt to be with him, how complete. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, Wade, I will marry you." Joy transformed his features. He rose to his feet and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that took her breath away. When they finally parted, both were breathless and laughing. "May I?" Wade asked, holding up the locket. Cassandra nodded, turning so he could fasten it around her neck. The silver felt cool against her skin, a tangible symbol of their commitment. "It's perfect," she said, touching it gently. "I'll treasure it always." They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, planning their future together. Wade wanted a spring wedding, after calving season, but before the summer heat. Cassandra agreed, suggesting May when the wildflowers would be in bloom. Henry Xander was waiting on the porch when they returned, one look at their radiant faces telling him all he needed to know. He embraced Cassandra warmly. "Welcome to the family, my dear. You've made my son happier than I've ever seen him." Joseph Davis was equally pleased when they shared their news that evening. He shook Wade's hand firmly and kissed his daughter's cheek. "Your mother would be so proud," he told Cassandra. "She always wanted you to find a man worthy of your heart." News of their engagement spread quickly through Westcliff. Most reactions were positive. The Xanders were respected, and many had witnessed Cassandra's dedication during Wade's recovery. Even Mrs. Peterson could find little to criticize, though she did remark that the courtship had been unusually brief. "Let them talk," Wade said when Cassandra mentioned the gossip. "What matters is what we feel, not what others think." The months leading to their wedding passed in a whirl of preparations and shared dreams. Wade began construction on an addition to the ranch house, a medical office where Cassandra could treat patients. She, in turn, ordered medical supplies and books from Denver, planning how she would divide her time between ranch responsibilities and health care. They were married on a perfect May morning in 1886, in the small church in Westcliff. Cassandra wore a gown of ivory satin with lace at the collar and cuffs, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers gathered from the meadow where Wade had proposed. Wade, fully recovered from his injuries, stood tall and proud in a new black suit, his eyes never leaving Cassandra as she walked down the aisle on her father's arm. The reception was held at the Xander Ranch, with tables set up under the cottonwood trees near the stream. Neighbors from miles around attended, bringing gifts and well wishes for the couple. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the valley, Wade led Cassandra away from the celebrations to their special spot by the water. "Mrs. Xander," he said softly, drawing her into his arms. "How does it sound?" "Wonderful," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "Though I might still be Dr. Davis professionally," Wade laughed. "Dr. Davis Xander, perhaps. Whatever you choose, I'm the luckiest man in Colorado to call you my wife." "And I'm the luckiest woman to have found a husband who values my mind as well as my heart," Cassandra said. "Even if it took a stampede and 27 stitches to bring us together." "Best stampede of my life," Wade murmured, lowering his mouth to hers in a tender kiss sealed with a promise of forever. Their life together unfolded with the changing seasons of the Colorado mountains. The ranch prospered under their joint care. Wade's business acumen and hard work combined with Cassandra's organizational skills and practical knowledge. Her medical practice grew as well, with people coming from neighboring towns to seek her expertise. The following spring brought their first child, a son they named Joseph Henry after their fathers. 2 years later, a daughter, Elizabeth Rose, joined the family. Wade proved to be as devoted a father as he was a husband, reading to the children each night and teaching them to ride almost as soon as they could walk. Cassandra balanced motherhood with her medical practice, often carrying her children with her on visits to patients or treating minor ailments at the ranch office she and Wade had built together. She became known throughout the county for her skill and compassion, particularly in caring for women and children who had previously had little access to medical attention. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Wade surprised Cassandra with a trip to Denver, their first real vacation since their marriage. They left the children in the capable care of Joseph Davis and Henry Xander, who doted on their grandchildren and promised endless adventures during their parents' absence. In Denver, they stayed at the elegant Brown Palace Hotel, attending the theater and dining in fine restaurants. Wade arranged for Cassandra to meet with medical suppliers and the female doctor who had trained her, enabling her to order new equipment and learn about advancements in treatment. On their final evening in the city, after a sumptuous dinner, they walked arm in arm through the hotel gardens. The air was warm with the promise of summer, scented with roses and lilacs. "Happy, Mrs. Xander?" Wade asked, drawing her close against his side. "Completely," she assured him, resting her head on his shoulder. though I miss the children. As do I, he admitted. But it's been good for us to have this time together, hasn't it? To remember how it all began. Cassandra smiled up at him, love filling her heart. I remember every moment. How pale you looked when I first saw you after the stampede. How stubborn you were about the laudanum. How beautiful you looked, even with blood on your apron and exhaustion in your eyes, Wade countered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I think I started falling in love with you right then, though I was too close to death to recognize it. And I was too focused on keeping you alive to notice how handsome you were, she teased. Though I did admire your fortitude. Wade laughed, the sound warming her as it always did. We've come a long way from that day. And we have so far yet to go, Cassandra replied softly. Together. They returned to the ranch renewed, diving back into the rhythm of their shared life with fresh energy. The years that followed brought more children, twin boys, William and James, born in the winter of 1892, and another daughter, Margaret, who arrived as a surprise blessing when the older children were nearly grown. Wade and Henry expanded the ranch operations, adding more land and modernizing their methods. Cassandra established a small hospital in Westcliff, using her connections in Denver to bring in supplies and occasionally specialists for complex cases. Both ventures thrived under their care, becoming models for the region. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, Westcliff grew from a frontier outpost to a proper town. The railroad brought new residents and opportunities. Joseph Davis eventually sold his store and moved to the ranch, building a small cottage near the main house where he could be close to his grandchildren while maintaining his independence. Henry Xander lived to see his grandchildren grow into young adults, passing peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82. He left the ranch in Wade and Cassandra's capable hands, confident in the legacy they would continue. On their 25th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and friends from throughout the county, Wade and Cassandra renewed their vows under the same cottonwood tree where he had first proposed. Though silver now threaded their hair, and the years had left their mark in lines of experience on their faces, the love between them burned as brightly as ever. I never imagined when I rode out to treat a wounded cowboy that I was riding toward my destiny, Cassandra said that evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and purple. And I never dreamed, when I was fighting for my life beneath those cattle, that I was actually fighting my way toward a love that would define my existence, Wade replied, taking her hand in his. Every stitch you placed in my wounded body was also a stitch in the fabric of our shared life. Poetic for a rancher, she teased gently. I've had 25 years of inspiration, he countered, bringing her hand to his lips. They sat in companionable silence as darkness fell and the stars appeared, one by one, in the vast Colorado sky. Their journey had begun with pain and healing, with a wounded cowboy and a determined young nurse. It had grown into a love story written across decades, etched into the land they both cherished, and embodied in the family they had created together. Thank you, Wade said softly, for stitching me steady all those years ago. And thank you, Cassandra replied, leaning against his shoulder, for making me yours forever. Their children found them there hours later, still hand in hand beneath the stars, their faces peaceful with the contentment of a love that had withstood every test of time and circumstance. A love that had begun with healing hands and a grateful heart, and had grown into a legacy that would endure for generations to come.